over the last year, we've really realized that social media have stopped being social. They have become an attention casino optimized for outrage, not connection.
Christos Floros, founder of Monet, is our new guest today. Christos is a Greek, Luxembourgish entrepreneur, architect, and activist who founded Monet in 2025. Described as a European privacy-focused alternative to big tech, Monet is a social media platform designed to let users control their own algorithms. My name is Emna Chaouch, and this is Echoes of EuroPCom, the European podcast on public communication. Christos, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure. So we're here today together to talk about trust and transparency for social media made in Europe. I have a few questions for you, and the first one I want to ask is about the vision behind Monet. Monet wants to reimagine social media made in Europe. What gap did you see in today's platforms that made you think a new European-rooted alternative was necessary?
Right, superb. I'm glad that you asked about it in terms of a gap in the market, because that's the very big lesson that I've learned over the last year building it. Whilst there are many ideological reasons why many of us believe that we need European alternatives to social media, we need to identify a key gap in the market to be able to actually create a consumer product that people want to adopt. And so over the last year, we've really realized that social media have stopped being social. They have become an attention casino optimized for outrage, not connection. And so we decided, hey, what about rebuilding the promise of social media, the promise of connecting us to each other, the promise of connecting us to our neighbors? And that's what we're building.
Looking at the Reuters report, American platforms are entrenched in today's life and society. Do you really see a chance to establish a European competitor?
Absolutely. But just as I said before, it cannot just be an offer that we make, a solution that we propose just because it's European. It's very good to have that as an ideology, because Europeans today, they live on platforms that do not reflect neither European laws, neither values or our public interest. However, in order to compete, we need to provide a better reason on top of the fact that people want to leave because there's a trust collapse, right, in major social media platforms. So we need to create network effects, and we need to provide credible options. And once that happens, then yes, we can compete. And I'm really happy I'm not the only person working on social media alternatives. I'm almost weekly in discussions with the founders of Eurosky, with the founders of W Social, with the founders of Mastodon. So there's many of us building, and very, very excited for that.
And speaking of trust and transparency by design, is there a feature or a role that you initially wanted Monet to have that you later realized maybe was unrealistic or incompatible with principles of trust and transparency?
I think on that note, we were always very, very aligned. So we knew from the very beginning that we wanted to comply with GDPR laws. We wanted to comply already preemptively with the AI Act. The only thing that we learn is that, the perception of trust is almost as important as the technology of trust. So we really need to get very good at communicating to people what it is that we're building. And trust has this aspect, as I try to say, of technology. So the data that you collect or the data that you don't collect, but also trust is a long-term project to build. So it also has to do with who is able to join the platform, what kind of rhetoric is allowed on the platform, what kind of content is allowed on the platform. We really stand, I think, in very different different principles with some of our competitors based in Silicon Valley. On that, we really believe that platforms should have a responsibility, and that public and civil society should have a responsibility as well, and governments as well, in how these platforms are organized and run and protect the citizens. And this, by the way, this is not anti-American in any way. I think it's just very important to be pro pluralism in the digital world.
In an environment where disinformation spreads faster than ever, what does it practically mean to design a platform that is built on trust and transparency, not just in values, but also in everyday user experience?
For us, it's very simple. The first thing that we did was launch a platform in order to test how people would interact on it, right? Because we needed to make sure that not only do we offer a platform and it grows exponentially overnight, but we needed to make sure that we have moderation moderation practices in place. So on top of that, so really building robust moderation before we grow, we also ensured that only adults were able to enter the platform until we know we feel safe. You know, it's sometimes we get, I think in Europe, sometimes we're told we're being too cautious, but sometimes it's important to be cautious where it matters. So, you know, we don't allow children in the platform yet until we know that under 18s are able to navigate a safe environment, because you know, trust is experienced through interactions every day, not mission statements. I can just go out and say, you know, I'm building a platform based on trust, but I need to prove it every day. So clear rules must always be applied consistently, and of course, friction against virality also needs to be there when the risk is high, and we do that at the start by ensuring that every person on the platform can influence and understand why they see what content. And that has been the key for us from the beginning. But we brand it as algo control, but essentially there is no algo control. We show to people chronologically what is being posted on the platform, and on the main feed they only see the content from the people they follow and their friends. So the human aspect of it comes back, and we say, why should I just get bombarded with things that an algorithm believes I want to watch? I know what I want to watch, and if I want to watch something, just like we used to do when I was young, I will collect a cassette, I will collect a video, so I can collect who I follow and decide what I see.
Speaking of algo control and content moderation, let's talk about meeting DSA standards in practice. So DSA, the Digital Services Act, it sets clear expectations around algorithmic transparency, content moderation, and user empowerment. How does Monet put these principles into practice differently from global platforms?
Sorry, I was about to say for sure, and I laughed because every time I say for sure now, I think of Emmanuel Macron at Davos. But you know, for us, transparency is a product feature, so it's not just compliance paperwork. We see the DSA as something that enables us rather than something that just constrains us. The DSA for us is the will of citizens in Europe, and their will to be protected online and to be safe from disinformation. So we empower them with tools that are built into the interface from day one. It's been a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. And then, of course, you know, we need to build clear reporting and appeal and explanation mechanisms onto the platforms as we scale as well. But I think I mentioned it earlier in one of your questions in terms of how we also prepared for moderation. We have been, we've had a risk-aware design before we scale. So not after scandals. We are preparing, and I think we have 20 years of social media development on the other side of the Atlantic. We've seen what happens. I think there's no excuse for this, and we treat regulation basically as a floor, not a ceiling.
Speaking of building and scaling, let's talk about the challenges of building a safer social media. So of the technical, the business, and the cultural challenges that you face, which one is currently the hardest, and why would it be often underestimated?
Believe it or not, I think I have to start at the business side of things. It's very difficult to convince European venture capital, and European venture capital, by the way, that is often backed by European institutions such as the EIB and the EIF. It's very hard to convince them to invest in something that they feel is too risky. And that is a challenge that we are overcoming by showing traction, and that by showing to them that we are overcoming the other challenges, which are, the cultural challenge, because we have different expectations about what social media should be like, and there's a lot of discussions right now. And of course, people have been conditioned over the years to equate stimulation with value. We go and seek dopamine on these big tech platforms. So the key thing really is about having the funding required, not just for us, for all of us in this sector right now building in Europe, to be able to have that fuel to continue building. I really believe in what we're building, and beyond belief, we have now 50,000 people already on the platform in 3 months. So I think we've already moved beyond belief. So it's really about deploying capital, and that's something that I think businesses in the digital ecosystem in Europe all could agree on.
Mm-hmm. And many more people believe in it as well, since a big topic that we hear a lot about right now is European digital sovereignty. In relation to that, creating platforms rooted in European values is often linked to strengthening European digital sovereignty. So in your view, can a platform like Monet realistically shift the balance of digital power, and how?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are social media spaces have become the spaces of cultural exchange, of daily exchange. This is where we shape our society today. This is where we shape our democracies. So of course, when we're successful, we will absolutely shift things for the better. And we have to remember also that in all of this, again, we're not anti-American. I really believe that sovereignty doesn't mean isolation. It just means that we have a choice, and we need to retain that choice. And a successful platform proves that Europe can build consumer tech, and we can keep our data, we can keep our influence, we can keep our governance aligned with the will of the European people, and reduce the dependency on foreign platforms or public discourse. And I think what Europe really has to contribute to the game, while ensuring that healthier platforms don't become boring, because we still need to keep people, right? So consumer product. We need to ensure that Europe offers the world non-algorithmic, the post-algorithmic era of social media.
What would be a concrete sign that Monet has failed the European digital sovereignty, even if it still exists as a platform?
When you build every day with the purpose of building a platform for European sovereignty, you don't spend so much time thinking about that. But indeed, it is a question that keeps popping up. And I think what's really important is that our big institutions, our governments, our public funds, our pension funds, that for decades now have been pouring money and investing their money on the other side of the Atlantic, ensure that we retain ownership of these big platforms. And that applies for social media platforms, that applies for AI platforms that are incredibly important. We need to make sure that our tech companies remain incorporated here in Europe and remain managed here in Europe. I think it's really important.
Let's talk about the role of community now. A trustworthy platform is only as strong as the community that shapes it. You were mentioning 50,000 people in 3 months already. How do you plan to involve users, creators, and institutions in shaping the norms, the rules, and the culture of Monet?
That's a lot of long-term thinking in the question, because there's a difference between our early adopters. We don't call them users, we call them people. But there's a difference between the people that come in first, and then eventually once institutions and media realize, hey, people are here, then we can begin onboarding media and bigger personalities, let's say, that usually go where the people already are. But the norms emerge from the community itself. Very often we see that already on Monet. When we launched, we wanted to build this European alternative to Instagram to make sure that we don't have these foreign filters in terms of what gets seen and what doesn't. Very quickly we found out our community, our early adopters, were not the people we thought were going to be our early adopters. It wasn't Gen Z. It was actually women between the ages 40 and 50, followed by women between the ages of 30 and 40, followed by men in the same categories. And they wanted to share with a very different social graph. So they want to share with their closest, and they want to meet people like them. And they want to share mostly things about life. They don't want a platform that is plagued with what the other platforms are already plagued with. So then we learned from that. And we built around that. And so our early focus is on these high trust networks that are being created. and learning from the community and what they're telling us.
We're coming close to the end, slowly. This is the EuroPCom podcast, and we're addressing public communicators mostly. So I want to talk about public communicators as trust builders. They are the first line of defense against disinformation. So what role do you believe they should play on a platform like Monet to help set standards for credible and transparent communication?
I mean, I'm glad I'm glad that you position it like this, because indeed, platforms are the place where, as we said, people assemble. We get together to discuss our society, to discuss each other, and to shape our perception of truth. And this is what I was referring earlier to in terms of cognitive warfare. It's important that we provide a reliable platform in a very noisy information environment. It's important that the model is transparent, so that people know that we have accountable communication. I really look forward to working with European governments in the future to ensure that media laws also apply relative to and to our abilities to social media networks as well. I think our democracy cannot function if an algorithm decides that it's a lot more profitable to keep you on the platform for 10 hours by showing you extremism and things that make you fear, because it psychologically puts you there, puts you in a position to stay more. It's important to help establish norms for responsible sharing. It's important to counter disinformation with credibility instead of censorship. I think the DSA has already done a good job in setting the beginning of this. I think there's things that can be improved, simplified, and made sure that all citizens can understand what happens. But of course, the presence of trusted voices in these platforms raises the overall quality of discourse in a platform that works as intended. But there's a lot of work to do on ensuring that platforms are trust builders.
Christos, final question for you. Let's look at the future. If you look 5 to 10 years ahead from now, how could the success of a transparency-oriented European social media platform be measured, and particularly what changes would citizens notice in their daily digital lives?
That's a beautiful question. I think if people choose a human-first space in a future 5 and 10 years from now, I'm not even going to say 10 years because the next 5 years are already very difficult to predict, but in a future where AI-assisted expression, AI-assisted work, and agentic everything is predominant, I will be very happy if human attention is spent on platforms that produce less anxiety and outrage. I will be very happy if people can actually see updates from friends and local communities and use this tool to connect with each other. I'll be very lucky if public debates are less dominated by manipulation campaigns on other social media. And I'll be happy if European creators are able to build audiences without having to digitally leave the continent in order to reach their neighbors. I agree, and I'll bring back my friend Anna Zeider, who's building W. If governments are communicating on platforms like ours and on platforms like the one she's building, that'd be already great. I hope institutionally in the next 5 years, I mean, it has to happen now, but by the end of the 5-year period, we understand that social media is infrastructure. It's not an additional nice to have. Social media really is infrastructure, and we need to make sure that people who are spending time on top of that infrastructure, people who are building livelihoods, people who are building businesses, people who are spending their time and their lives documenting what they're doing on social media, feel empowered, feel in control, and not not in the current state of affairs where we're begging, like we see on Threads, the algorithm to be connected with the very people that we're already connected with.
Beautiful. Christos Floros, thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for having me, and thank you to everyone at the European Committee on the Regions for the work you do.
For our listeners, thank you for joining in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Echoes of EuroPCom. If you liked it, feel free to share it with your network. In the next one, we will welcome Stefana Broadbent, anthropologist of digital practices, to discuss AI and human connections. This is a podcast series of the European Committee of the Regions. For more information on EuroPCom, please visit the website cor.europa.eu.